So I might get a little nervous and sort of hide over here every once in a while. I hope that doesn't bother anyone. So as I mentioned, my name is David Muto, and I'm here to talk about how we can use experiments to drive features. Every time we add a feature, there's a long-term cost, and it's a cost we generally don't think about. But you add a feature, and now you have to support that feature, so there'll be bug fixes. You have support calls to support that feature. And even worse, people will actually use it. And once it's in production and once it's in use, now I can't just take it away if we decide we don't want to do that anymore. I have to deprecate it and go through whatever process it is that you go through. So yeah, I'm hoping that I can convince you that it's a good idea to use experiments to slowly decide which features you want to deliver. So a little introduction. It's kind of cool that the slides aren't both, sorry. I've been a developer for about 12 years. I have a lot of experience in other languages than Ruby, primarily in C# and Objective-C. I'm a total nerd, so I still write code in C. I write code in a lot of languages, but mostly, day-to-day, I use Ruby. I was born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada, and I still work there. And lately, I spend a lot of time with these two people. This is my girlfriend, Raven, and my 4-month-old son, Xavier. For some reason, they're standing in front of the Capitol building in Ottawa, just to be more Canadian. Today, I'm going to talk about how we use experiments at Shopify to decide which features actually make it to production and which ones don't. That's pretty much it. I'm going to go through some actual examples, an experiment we actually ran at Shopify recently. And I'll show you the results of that experiment, and the process we went through. And then I'm going to show you another way that we can use experiments to change our infrastructure safely. So with that, for those of you who don't know what Shopify is, it's a hosted e-commerce platform. It's for both web and point of sale. You can tell clearly by this slide, I'm a designer. I think you can tell. Obviously, I'm not a designer. A few facts about Shopify. It's used by about 100,000 online stores right now. You guys still hear me? It's used by about 100,000 shops around the world. Their monthly revenue is in excess of 200 million, so people actually use our software to run their business, and they do it successfully. This year, it's been in development for 10 years. So it started in 2004 using Ruby 1.8.2 and Rails pre-1. At the time, or around that time, our CEO was actually a core member of the Rails team. And even though we've been running for 10 years, we are running the current stable releases of Ruby and Rails in production. We've never gone through a net new rewrite. It is the same code base. We can track every revision since the first day we put it into Git, and then we can go back and find all the subversion stuff. That took a lot of work. That wasn't very easy. Some shops that are on Shopify that you might know. We have a GitHub shop. Sometimes people buy things from there. There's another shop called The Chivery that's pretty large that is using Shopify as well. Now you know who they are. We do a lot of things. Like, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that experiments are the only reason we're successful. There's a lot of things that go into it. But I want to bring up a couple of things that we do that have led to our success. First, we track all the things. So anything you think would be important to know, you need to start tracking now. And that's a prerequisite to doing experiments because I need to have something to compare against. So users sign up, I know about it. Users got through one step of the sign up and didn't finish the second step, I know our drop off. Someone added a custom domain, I know about it. Someone created a product, I know about it. All these things are important to know so that you can use this information later. So track all the things. When in doubt, track it. It's kind of worth it. We do things and tell people. This sounds really simple, but a lot of companies don't do this very well. I mean, I don't want to give out an actual number. We are now hundreds of people. And that is difficult to make sure that, like, when you actually do something, does anyone ever know what you do day to day? Do you do something and it goes live and no one ever knows about it? So we do, every Thursday, we make sure we do demo days of what we're doing. And we also do lightning talks once a week, so anyone can get up and speak about what they're doing. Of course, we use pull requests in GitHub, and we make sure we tag other teams so people know what's going on. And I think this is really important if you're going to be running experiments, because you don't want someone to do something else in the code base that just destroys your whole experiment. So it's important that people know what's going on. And then we ship fast and break things. And every time I mention this, someone always thinks like, oh God, you break things? Well, not really. That's not the goal anyway. We ship fast in terms of deliver something small and simple, whatever works. And then we start using experiments to drive further development on it. So if we were going to introduce a new feature, my preference would be to experiment. But let's say we just introduced one. The smallest amount you can possibly do is what you want, and then just slowly, incrementally measure changes. Does it get better? Is it worse? Does it perform well? Does it not? And the break things part is more about not being afraid to break software. Don't be worried about actually breaking it. Instead, shift the focus on what you can learn from the mistakes you will inevitably make. You are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Learn from them. Don't be sitting around waiting for 10 people to say, yes, you can do something, and then get 45 code reviews before it goes into production. If you're that nervous about it, perhaps release something smaller, something incremental on the way there. Yeah. We actually have this on the wall in our office in Toronto, this beg for forgiveness idea. Don't wait for permission. Go out and do it. Get something into production. Start collecting data now. And if you make a mistake, just beg for forgiveness. I'm sorry. We'll fix it. Again, I'm not suggesting you go out and break software. That's not really the point. So today I'm going to talk about experimentation with software. And there's a lot of different ways to experiment. You see this quite commonly in UX circles. They'll talk about bringing random people in of different demographics to look at your software and sort of measure what they're doing. That is not what I'm talking about today. That is actually very valuable, but that's not what I'm talking about today. Today I'm talking about empirically measuring your software with your actual user base. So not random samples, but your users, people that actually use your application. There's a few things we have to go through. I'm just going to run through a couple of high-level steps of things that you need to do to get an experiment going. First, you need to identify an area of improvement. You can do this because you're tracking all the things. You can do this using any of the data you have. You can track where drop-off happens, and maybe you can improve that. You can use your support calls. So where's the highest support level? And say, okay, well, let's try and focus on fixing that part. You can, one thing we do quite often, at least on my team, we look at very successful stores and stores that are less successful and try and find out what are all these guys doing that very few of these guys are. And then try and find a way to, how do we get these people to do those things? For their own benefit, not for us. Another way you can do this really well if you have large dev teams is to try and dog food your product as much as possible. So all of us at Shopify are encouraged to run our own Shopify stores. This gives us a chance to actually use the product instead of just develop the product. And that gives us a little bit of empathy with our users because we actually know the pain points. One company that does this extremely well is GitHub. To work on GitHub, you have to use GitHub. So day in, day out, you're always using it, and I think they do a really great job at that. Perhaps the best I've ever seen. So once you've identified an area you want to look at, you have to guess how it can be better. And the word guess is on purpose, because if you knew, then you really don't need an experiment. If you actually know that what you're going to do is better, just do it. But most of the time, I think you're wrong. Sorry, it's just true. Most of the time, I know I'm usually wrong. That's why I'm saying that. So it's okay to be wrong here. You can always beg for forgiveness. Get out there and try something and measure it. And beg for forgiveness if you have to. But I don't think you'll have to. And lastly, this is the easy part, right? You just break your subjects down into groups, run different versions for each group, and compare the results for each group. That's easy, right? It's easier said than done. There's a few tricks to it. And that's where we have a gem we wrote called Verdict. I'm not going to make this talk about the gem, but we do have this gem, again, nicely designed slide by me. It will help you define experiments, split your subjects into groups, and for each one of those groups you can qualify. It does a whole bunch of things for you. I have a whole bunch of slides here that I'm just going to skip through right now, because I don't think I'll give you an example. I don't think it's valuable for me to go through each one of these with some code samples and expect you to remember any of that. I just put them in here so when I publish the slides, they'll be there. The gem is open source, so you're able to go and take a look at it, fork it, make some changes if you like. I'm just going to, I'll show it in context when I go through the examples, as opposed to just by itself. So let me just skip through some of these. See, can you imagine me going through each one of these? You guys would have been bored stiff. All right, so moving on to an actual experiment that we ran at Shopify recently. One of the things we do when we're looking at things like, in this case, domains, but in all cases, it could be customers, discounts, orders, products, anything you're setting up, we look at the Zoe state for these things. And what I mean by that is 0, 1, or infinite. So when you're in the 0 state, I know you don't have any of these things. So if you don't have any domains, I'm going to show you a lot of information about domains. Tell you about it, what the benefits are. If you have one of them, maybe I'll show you some help related to how you can keep going. And then once you have 2 or more, I'm going to get out of your way. I'm assuming you know what you're doing. Still have a little help link at the bottom. So this experiment focuses on the blank slate, which is the 0 state. And currently, that's what we have for the 0 state. I'm going to show this again, so I'm not going to pick this apart yet. But this is what I mean by 0 state. There are no domains, so what do you see? I could just say there are 0 results returned, but that to me seems like a lost opportunity. So this is what we're doing. So we wanted to come up with a way to increase the number of custom primary domains. So we only want 1 per shop. You can have as many as you like if you want. But we're trying to get shops that don't have primary domains to use them. And the reason is that we saw that our most successful shops have primary domains, and our lesser successful shops, that percentage is a lot lower. So we think that we can help make you more productive and a better business by having a primary domain. So we make a couple of assumptions in this experiment. These are the assumptions for the design I'm going to show you in a couple of slides here. That consistent placement of call to action is a good thing, meaning I want to have that learned behavior. If you have none and there's a big magic button in the center that says add domain, and then you add one and you want to add another one, but that button's not there anymore, that seems like a problem to me. So I think putting the buttons where they're always going to be is a good thing. Prominent placement of context-sensitive help, I think, is a good thing as well. So this is, I'm hoping that while you're on domains and you don't have any, I can give you all the information you need about adding a domain, what a good domain is, things like that, right now. And maybe as a side benefit, that'll even drop support calls. And then finally, we all work in tech. So if I asked anyone in this room what a domain is, I'd be very surprised if someone couldn't tell me. But not everyone in this room, this room doesn't represent all of Shopify's customers. We have people that have retired and started a new business. We have people that aren't very technical. So I think if I told them what a URL was, they'd be pretty clear. But using the word domain is tough. And I think if I just showed them what a domain is, that'd be fine. I know at least 2 people would benefit. These are my parents, for sure. They would like to see what a domain is because they don't really know. So again, we take a look at this current state. And this is what we're interested in changing. We can see that it has some negative messaging. There it says, you haven't added any custom domain yet, any custom domains yet. It's like you've done something wrong, but you haven't, obviously. So we're going to change that, I think. Or this was the goal of the experiment, to change that. That add a domain button in the center there, when you look at the state that happens after you have 1 or more domains, there is no add a domain button in the center. And if you look at the top right, neither one of those 2 buttons says add a domain. It might be hard to read. One says add existing domain, the other says buy a domain. And then finally, there is some help there, but it's like a little link at the bottom that nobody really clicks. They just call support. So we came up with a design for some new hotness. And this idea was to put the buttons where they're always going to be, top right. You can always add an existing domain or buy a domain. We changed the negative messaging to something more positive, add a custom domain to get started. We have a clear definition of what we mean by domain with that picture of a browser. It's the thing you put in the address bar. That's what we're talking about. You definitely can't read it from there, but there's some text below that leads to articles on how to choose a good domain name, what you should be looking for. And then at the very bottom, we have that little help icon, like a help icon that lets you know that something's going on there. So to do this, we had to go through a few things. This is why I didn't go through Verdict, because I knew I was going to go through some of it here. We need to define an experiment. So what we do is we define an experiment with some unique handle. In this case, it's called Onboarding Domains Blank Slate Experiment. We use long names so we know exactly what it's relative to. And then we need to define groups. And the groups are, when you think of traditional A/B testing, I'm talking about A and B, the different groups. One group is going to see this, one group is going to see that. So in this case, I have two groups, one for control, which is the group that's going to see the current 0 state for domains. And then I have one group called enhanced, which is going to see the new hotness. So it's a 50% split. Then I have a qualify block, and what that's doing is I don't want every shop to be part of this experiment, because that would be really biased. What I want is from the start date of this experiment until I stop this experiment, every new shop that signs up is split into one of those groups, and I measure them on the same interval of time. And that's what the qualify block does for us. If it's a little hard to read, it just says, I want shops that are created after this started. And then finally, there's a little storage mechanism there that I'm using Redis to store the assignments. Fan of Redis over here. We're using it to store the assignments so that every time I ask Verdict, what group is this shop in, I don't want to have to recalculate the qualify block and then resegment. Even though it is deterministic, I still want to make sure it's stored, and I just return the storage on. Don't have to remember this code. You don't have to remember it. Deciding what to show is pretty straightforward. So deciding what to show, I open up the domains controller. I make a helper method called show new hotness. And that last line there, well, second to last because of the end, I ask Verdict for this particular experiment, which group is the shop in? Does it happen to equal enhanced? So I have a special case for enhanced shops. So far, so good? All right. Then you just have to update your view. If show new hotness, then render the blank slate hotness. Otherwise, render the old blank slate. So unqualified and control are actually seeing the same thing here, so I don't need a special case for the control group. Not so bad. The next thing is like push your PR up. You get one of these on your PR, and then you're all happy. That means you can push it. You're good. We have a lot of crazy squirrels on our PRs. I think a lot of teams do that. I, of course, am very professional and never do things like this. Ever. So if we take a look at the results of this experiment, there's no way you're going to be able to read that, so I'll read it out to you. The enhanced group outperformed or converted better than control with 100% confidence. This doesn't always happen. 95 is what we're looking for. That's what we consider significant. 100 is rare. This one happened to be really successful. I wanted to show you a successful one so that I can help convince you it's a good thing. So if we actually look at the data that comes through, the control group converted at just over 15%, and the enhanced group converted at just over 17.5%. It actually turned out to be a relative increase of 2.66%. That might sound small. That's amazing. That means that all I had to do was this, and I got 2% better conversion with confidence. Like I know that it's better. So now I'm going to go ahead and drop control and only have enhanced. Enhanced becomes the new control for the next experiment. You can use this type of experiment with all sorts of things. You can use it, imagine you had a user sign-up form that has 3 fields on one page and then 5 more fields on the other, like everyone likes to do. They like to hide more information later. You can measure your drop-off and then run an experiment. What happens if I move all the fields to the first page? For sure, you'll still have drop-off, but is it better? You can actually measure that. You can do this for design changes. I want to try a new theme out. Sure, write an experiment though. Make sure that it doesn't hurt any of your normal conversions. Make sure users are still signing up. This is all important stuff, and it's actually quite easy to do. So I'm going to go through one more example of using experiments to do something that isn't actually for your users. But, well, it indirectly is because you're not breaking your site. This is kind of good. So what I'm going to go through is the idea of extracting an embedded entity. So what we have here is a user model, and it's got some user details, and then street, city, province, postal, country, and phone. Now, I know nobody in this room, nobody here would ever do this, right? Nobody would ever put street, city, province, postal, country, and phone into any model that isn't called address or some variation of address, right? I think I can try. I believe you. I believe you. I would never do this either. Can you tell if I'm lying? What we want is to switch this out. So what we want is to pull the address stuff out, and we're going to make it so that users can have multiple addresses, just in case. Why not? It's just a simple one-to-many. So how do we do this, right? Generate the model, run the migration, change user RB to work, and then YOLO ship this right now, right? No. No, no, no. No YOLO shipping. If you have a small application where the only user of your database is your application, you might be able to get away with that. But as your applications get larger, you're going to have other things that rely on that schema. We have a data warehouse that has ETLs that move data between them. I can't just change it. I mean, well, I could, and I would think it worked until tomorrow. Then it'd be a big problem. So we can do this with an experiment. And what I've done here is defined an experiment where I'm qualifying everybody. Everyone qualifies. Every shop that's ever been created is part of this experiment. And then I'm setting a rollout percentage to 5%. I'm going to roll this out to 5% of the people. And then I'm telling Verdict not to store the assignments. Even though we normally store them in Redis, I don't want them to be stored this time because I want to be able to change the percentage and have more shops get included in the experiment. So as this rolls out to 100, none of it will be stored. They can keep getting requalified and added. And I'm taking advantage of the fact that I know that Verdict's algorithms are deterministic. So if shop with ID 1 happened to go into the control group, it'll always go into the control group. Even if I change the rollout percentage, it'll keep reevaluating to the... Hello? Aha. Much better. Okay. Sorry if I just yelled in everyone's ear. All right. So that wasn't me, I promise. So now that we defined the experiment, we go ahead and create the address model. This is nothing fancy, RailsG model. That's nothing fancy. We tweak the migration just to add an index and make sure that some of the fields are not null. And then updating user. All we're going to do here is we add the has many, and we put a little after save method there called copy address. And in there I check if this current user is part of the experiment. Then I'm going to get a hold of the default address or initialize one if it doesn't exist, create some values, and call save bang, because that's what we all do in production. Just bang, I don't care. Obviously, you shouldn't do that in production, but that's been the exact idea. We're going to copy it over. And then you do the rest of the things. Right? The rest of the things here would be actually ship this to production right away. And after you've done this, you modify your ETL tools to check to see if there's an address record for this user. If there is, use that. If there isn't, use the properties on the actual user. And you can just leave your ETL process like that until you've rolled this out to 100% of the people. You're going to roll it out to 5%. After a little while and things look good, roll it out to 10, 20, 50. I would advise going slower than you might think. Just roll this out slowly until everyone's using it. Once you know that it's good and you've rolled it out to 100%, all you need to do is a small maintenance task to migrate any users that hadn't saved their records yet, move them over. Then you can drop all the fields and make sure it works. Do all the rest of the things. Seem like a decent idea? Maybe? Yeah? All right. For some closing remarks, all I'd say is avoid the temptation to know what your users want. Because almost certainly you're incorrect, or at least at best case, partially correct. Make sure you actually take the time to measure. It's using tools like Verdict. There are other ones if you're not a fan of this one, but use something. Measure. success, as opposed to think about it. When in doubt, if you're not sure if you should do something or how to measure it, validate your assumptions. Go through, like, oh, I think this would be really cool. Why? Ask yourself why a couple of times, and maybe make some experiments that target those assumptions. And lastly, have fun. Experiment with stuff. Don't be afraid to break things. This is a great way to, you can just add yourself to the experiment. Try something in production. A great way that we've had success with is, instead of having these crazy staging environments that look like production, we just go ahead and test in production, where the qualify block is that you have to be a staff member. Lots of other companies do this too. Yeah. With that, thank you very much. My name is David Muto.